Hello and welcome to the Wisden Cricket Weekly Podcast. There's been loads happening around the leadership positions in English men's cricket this week. The county championship tables are beginning to take shape, and there have been a number of talking points in the IPL too. I'm Yas Rana, and with me to cover that and more is former England batter Mark Butcher, the magazine editor of Wisden Cricket Monthly Joe Harman, and the editor-in-chief of Wisden Cricket Monthly Phil Walker. Let's start with the news and reports around what's going to happen to the England men's sides this summer and beyond. By the time this podcast comes out, Ben Stokes may well have already been named England's next Test captain. Multiple outlets are reporting that he's the clear front-runner for the role. England's new managing director of men's cricket, Rob Key, has stated his desire for the coaching job to be split between red ball and white ball cricket. Those two jobs are currently being advertised. Nick Holt in The Telegraph is reporting that Gary Kirsten has been approached to be the new head coach of the Test team. As you may recall from a few months ago, Phil spoke to him and Kirsten at the time said that he would love to be involved. Holt also reports that one of Stokes' first moves as captain will be to bring back Stuart Broad and James Anderson into the Test fold. Broad, according to Holt, came close to retiring and taking a gig at Sky. Had England won in the Caribbean and Root remained in the job, that would have become even more likely. Butch, it sounds like your good friend Rob Key has had a busy first week in the job. Don't suppose you've managed to rearrange those tea times yet?
Well, has he ever? Yeah. He's been in wall-to-wall meetings all week, as you would expect, given that there are no current positions being held beyond his at the moment. So he's going to have a few more weeks like that, I should think, coming up.
The only thing that's confirmed is that there will be the coaching job is going to be split. What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, I mean, I've been pretty public around my feeling that I don't think that it's a good idea. I don't necessarily think that is the road to great success, and that I still think that one man, one voice should be the overall coach of both dressing rooms. Albeit that man would have to delegate and have to have people who would step into the breach from time to time when the workload gets ridiculous. The powers of delegation, etc., which previous coaches have already done. And the reason behind that is, I worry that human nature being what it is, and with even though that the teams look like they're very, very split at the moment, there are still enough players who do move between those dressing rooms that inevitably you're going to find a situation where players will enjoy one environment more than the other, and that's never a good starting place. So look, I don't think it's necessary. Rob's been very, very keen on it. For example, the one day side kind of looks after itself anyway. You got to, even if Owen Morgan were to step down as captain, which the thoughts around him perhaps not earning his place in the T20 side going towards the World Cup on merit will get louder and louder if he doesn't start off well in the summertime. Even if he is no longer the man in charge, somebody like Josh Buttler would come in and the thing would be very, very seamless. Having a high-profile coach for the T20, so you kind of think, well, why? I don't see what the point of that. The Test team is the one that seems to be more in need of looking after, but I would still argue that a big name, a big personality is not what it needs at all. It needs somebody to sit in the background and make wise and careful decisions around either personnel or some tactical decisions, but most of that should be down to the captain anyway, and to stay out the bloody way.
Yeah.
It's not football. You don't need. It's not a management role. He's not sort of calling the shots. The captain still calls the shots. Part of the issue with the previous coaching setup was that the poor old Chris Silverwood had to do 7 jobs in one. That will not be the case under Rob Key. Won't let that happen. But if he wants to split it and they find 2 people, the ECB got the money clearly to pay 2 enormous salaries for 2 guys, then fair enough. And the proof will be in the pudding as to how it works out. I just don't think it's necessary.
Do you think that with the schedule now, it's just so much harder to do both than previously, and also in terms of who you could possibly attract? Now, if you split the jobs, you can get a white ball coach who also has a gig in the IPL, which must be a good thing at some point down the line.
You mentioned Silverwood, and Silverwood was probably pretty burnt out by the end of his tenure, which was challenging anyway on the pitch, but also off the pitch in particular. And it became a bit of a cliche towards the end, but he was living out of a suitcase for 300 days a year. I think that, combined with the increasing divergence between the two forms, plus, as you say, the sort of saturation point of international cricket and how that ties into franchise domestic cricket as well, and the really big dogs have fingers in lots of different pies for sure. I think that on balance feeds into the rationale that Rob Key appears to be working to now. And personally, I understand it. I think in an absolutely ideal world, everything is coherent and all under one roof. But I think looking at the landscape now, it is so mixed and so diverged that I can kind of understand the logic behind it. Really, there are ego issues at work.
That's always going to be my argument against it, because if you remember when the last time we had the split, you had one side of thing. The test match team was very much the priority back in those days when Flower and Ashley Giles were and they were competing against each other for the players that they wanted. Now,
that's a fascinating element of this. Is
that's going to happen?
Is the personalities? I don't think you can just choose each person in their own right. They've got to be essentially a team, even if they're looking after different teams. They've got to have personalities that can actually work together, and that is going to be a really tricky thing for Rob Key to find.
And if your job spec is to be coach of the white ball side, you're not really going to give too much of a stuff what happens to the. This is the point.
You're going to protect your own backyard,
aren't
you?
Of course you are. Absolutely, it's human. That's why I said human nature in the beginning. Is that the two things eventually, without any question, will end up competing against one another, and one side will come out on top. One side will feel that they've been either sidelined or hard done by, and the whole thing will be acrimonious, as it was the last time we did it.
I guess you almost had that already with two different captains, right? If there was a feeling last summer that Joe Root wasn't getting what he wanted all the time, even though Morgan actually didn't have his best team that often either. So that kind of already exists.
But that's a good example, probably in favour of Butcher's argument, even though I don't necessarily agree with it. Yeah. But there was an imbalance, and that was partly down to personalities, you could argue, and that Morgan ran the show to an extent that he basically got what he wanted. And that is not Root's personality in the same way. And the test side ended up suffering partly, amongst many other factors, as a result of that. So, it didn't work with Giles and Flower because Flower clearly ran the show and the white ball stuff was an afterthought. They've got to somehow land on something which looks like an even balance. And as Butch alludes to, that is going to be a tricky thing to do. I still think, even though it's an imperfect solution, it's probably the best one, just because the two things are so different now.
And the schedule is just becoming more and more extreme. England literally play an ODI series between two test matches this summer, which is something that's not...
We had scenarios like that whereby, your sort of assistant coach or whatever. Don't forget that when you hire nowadays, when there is a coach hired, there is also an assistant coach hired, and there'll be batting coaches, fielding coaches, and all that kind of things. Are we saying that we're going to literally have two completely different squads worth of specialist coaches and assistant coaches as well? So if you double the two men at the top, you then double the rest of them as well.
Indeed, and this is a good point.
So however, my issue is where does it stop? And my other issue is around actual cricket, as opposed to personnel and management and all that kind of stuff. Is that I argue until I'm blue in the face that the two things, albeit they look as though they're completely different sports or different disciplines, they're not. The best players in the world and the best teams in the world have lots of players who are capable of transferring their skills between one and the other. We in England seem to have decided that you've got Venus on one side and Mars on the other with the two sports. It's the same bloody game. It's just speeded up a bit.
I hear all of that. Just going back to the idea about having two completely distinct coaching setups. Well, surely the cute and smart way would be to go to Collingwood if Collingwood is looking like going to be the next in line to be the kind of assistant coach to Morgan, in effect, right, of the 50 over side and 20 over side. Then he could possibly double up. He could dovetail as assistant coach to whoever takes the test job. So there is that link between the two sides of it. So that there's a degree of logic there, possibly. But the other thing that I would add on this whole question, just before we move on, is if it's going to be, I don't know, Kirsten or Ponting or Jayawardene, and they say, I want the test job, but I don't want the lot. And on the balance, Key thinks he has to be my man. Then you want that person properly au fait with 4-day cricket. You want them going out and really focusing on that and that alone. We had the problem with Bayliss when he said quite openly, I don't really know who's scoring runs in county cricket. And I know that he had scouts here and there that was feeding information in. But if he's the one who's making the final decision, then you would want him really to have his eyeballs solely on red ball cricket. And
I mean, that's where the other job of selector is unbelievably important.
Indeed.
The one that was decided was not necessary anymore. I mean, that's
we don't have that. We don't even have that as an option, let alone
so
personnel.
that's another job, another gig that's unbelievably important. And again, I'm not. I think back to times gone by, you would have a selector and his selection team that would go around and would feed all that information. There has to be a degree of trust between the people who have the roles to find the players and the people that pick them, because no matter how many head coaches you've got, those guys are going to be looking after their teams. They're not going to be running around the country looking at players. So there's always a degree of kind of, I have to have somebody that I have a working relationship with, somebody whose views and whose eye I trust when it comes to players, and that's how it works. It's how it's always worked.
Yep.
How do you go about finding a good selector? Because like with a coach, you've got a record of them coaching sides well, but with selection, there's not really that much to go off.
No, there isn't. David Graveney, I think they all kind of learn on the job to a certain extent. I think the key to it really is to have somebody that's removed enough from dressing rooms and from current players to have any sort of, unconscious bias around, the people that he's picking or players and whatever. Somebody that's been in the game, someone who's played it a lot, and somebody who has a good eye for a player. And there are plenty of people like that around. Who are, a selector's job was never sort of a paid role in the past. It was somebody that, had done his service to the game and was kind of giving back and all the rest of it. And there are lots and lots of people like that who have played in mountains and mountains of county cricket and test match cricket who would be very good at that job. I mean, I think Ed Smith was kind of all right at it. I mean, he was sometimes a bit too clever for his own good. And his downfall was basically that he wouldn't remove himself from the dressing room. Stay miles away from there. Don't get anywhere near it. Stay away. Not your job, not your place. And that's what did for him in the end.
Let's be honest, I mean, the best trait a selector can have is having some good players to select in the first place. Yeah. And that's the thing. And Graveney ended up with a very positive reputation as a selector eventually, but early days was pretty shocking, as we've discussed on this podcast previously. Jeff Miller gets a lot of credit, and I'm sure rightly so in some aspects, but he was just picking a lot of very, very good players for a really cohesive team. I think it's one of those jobs that, more than anything in cricket, really, because you've got so little control. You pick your team, you give them. I think you really are. You have so little control there, and that's why I think on this podcast, I think we were probably unfashionably quite positive about Ed Smith at the time, and I think recent history has shown that, as Butch says, he wasn't such a bad person at the role at all, apart from probably getting too involved with the players and maybe speaking a bit too openly to the press at times.
We talked a lot about the pros and cons of Stokes as captain, so I don't want to dwell on that too long. I guess it's interesting that Broad and Anderson sound like they're back in the frame, though these are only reports. I know we talked about how Key saw the logic in not taking them to the Caribbean, but I guess bringing them back is partly out of necessity, right? There aren't that many seamers who are fit at the moment, and England haven't won many test matches recently.
And also, I think there was a lot of talk around the sense of this being the final moment, the valedictory end point of these two greats' careers. I never personally saw it like that necessarily. I saw it as a convoluted decision that Root had taken, partly driven by his own determination to remark his territory and to re-establish his authority, possibly, but also a sense of these are three test matches that are lower profile than, not necessarily agreeing with it, but that was the logic. And time maybe after the horrors of the Ashes to try and take a breather and to start again a little bit and look at one or two others. I didn't think that was ever the final end point, and I was on this show saying that at the time. So it doesn't surprise me that the murmurs coming out are commonsensical ones. And it seems like we've had quite a common sense week by the sounds of it. Stokes is on pound for pound probably the best option. Stokes, pound for pound, thinks I want my best team out. For home
Damn
series.
right he does.
Absolutely.
You don't want to start. I think back.
You don't want to hand behind your back when you kick off. So
another handover of power when Nasser sort of took over from Athers, and he was kind of landed with an experimental team to go down to South Africa with. But he did have Goff and he had Caddick, and Atherton was still around. But there was kind of a lot of players who were never to be seen again after the end of that. And Nasser, as he forged that relationship with Duncan during the course of that tour, what happened afterwards? He went back. he went back to a lot of to some grizzled, to some sort of players who'd been around the block a little bit, gave them a little bit more agency in terms of saying, listen, we think you're the best players out there. We are going to stay together as a team. Don't worry about your place. It's not going to be how it was. And from there started to build. Now, if Ben Stokes is clever, Ben Stokes is going to want to do a very similar thing. He's not going to want to put his head on the block, which is what you do as a captain, with a bunch of guys who are untried and untested, having had 2 or 3 years of lots of people untried and untested have all failed. He's going to look at it and go, well, I want to get off to a winning start here. Totally. And the way that I'm able to make decisions from a position of strength is if we win. And the best chance of us winning is by picking 2 blokes who win a lot of test matches for England at home. Yeah. It's by looking perhaps at some players who've had a go at test match cricket, who are a little bit longer in the tooth with the bat, who might be able to consistently score some runs for us. It might not be the sexiest thing. The press won't like it particularly. But in order to try and stop yourselves from being a side that's easy to push around and easy to beat, you have to make these decisions to shore it up. And if Ben's a smart man, that's what he will do.
Just on leadership roles as well. You discussed Stokes and what he'll bring to the captaincy and some of the concerns in quite a lot of depth last week. But one thing I hadn't been talked about, and perhaps because there's so many roles up for grabs at the moment, is who will be his vice captain. And I think that's going to be really important in a way. That role is not something that gets talked about very much for obvious reasons. But in this instance, with Stokes' fitness record as it is, and so much uncertainty around the personnel and the group in general, I think that's going to be fascinating to see who they go with. And it might be an olive branch to Broad to make him vice captain, not long term, but for the summer, as a way of bringing this all back together. If he's going to be in the squad anyway, I think that might be quite a sensible move. Then obviously that does open it up to the fact that Stokes does a hamstring or his knee goes again. We've suddenly got Stuart Broad, England Test captain, which I think we've all got this kind of curiosity to see how that plays out. Another possible name to throw out there, Stokes thinks the world of Joss Buttler. Will he want Joss Buttler back in alongside him as the vice captain in that Test side? Lots of people say he shouldn't be in that team at all, let alone be vice captain. But I wouldn't be surprised if Stokes does want Buttler alongside him.
Stokes and Broad would be kind of like a weird coalition government in charge.
It would have that in the Rose Garden at Lord's. It got very toxic as well around the Broad and Anderson question. I mean, everything's toxic these days anyway, but definitely, and this won't be in his thinking, but it would be good, unwittingly, it would be good PR as well, right? To give the message that everybody's pickable, everybody's selectable, everybody's on the table. There are no agendas anymore. This is a clean slate. And that would be useful, I think, to convey that, not just to the game, but to the punters who follow it. Because there's been this kind of dark edge around the England team for too long. And there is now that sense, okay, this is a sort of glasnost period, if you like. We're starting from scratch. We're opening everything up again. And it would be a really bad start if Stokes were to already be saying in the background, I don't want him, but I do want him, and I don't want him, and I do want him. That's just not the way to start.
The county championship. It's been
because I agree with you.
Okay, lovely.
The county championship. It's been another really good week for batters. A few huge innings wins. Lancashire's test class attack of Anderson, Mahmood, Hassan Ali and Matt Bargson forced a win on a pretty flat one at Old Trafford. Hassan Ali took 9 in the match. Josh Bohannon scored a double ton for Lancashire. He now averages 47.5 in first class cricket. Not many of them about.
He plays, you would think.
I think there are lots of young-ish batters doing pretty well at the moment.
Go.
Harry Brook.
Pitches are just too flat in county cricket, aren't they?
No, pitches are fantastic. That's exactly the way we want to see cricket matches being won. By bowlers having to work bloody hard to take the wickets, batters scoring runs. That's good.
I think I said it last week.
I'm taking credit for it, by the way, as well.
Absolutely. It's squarely on you. Brilliant pitch here again, second week in a row at the Oval.
Yeah.
Pace, bounce, bit of green, carry, folks taking it with his gloves up. Everything was good about that pitch.
And
good
a great
players
game.
Scored good runs, good quicks, took good wickets.
Yeah, and a great game, which is no surprise.
There's another good game for Harry Brook. He scored 84 and 77 not out, but that wasn't enough for Yorkshire to claim victory over Northants. There was a maiden 100 for Yorkshire's 21-year-old number 3 George Hill. Northants's new keeper Lewis McManus batted for over 3 hours to help them at the end. I think Harry Brook, I think there's a good chance he plays the first test of the summer because he is such a good white ball cricketer that I don't think he goes another summer without getting an IPL gig. So he won't get this stint at the start, this 8-game stint at the start of the summer, possibly ever again. And I think England possibly need to make a decision one way or the other with him. And he's got off to a brilliant start. And yeah, I think he just looks so good.
A bit of IPL blackmail. Pick me or I'll go.
I think there's a reason.
He's good though. I mean, he's a damn good player. He is.
I guess the one maybe advantage that Bohannon might have over Brook is that he's more of a number 3.5, 4, whereas Brooks maybe more of a 4.5, 5, and obviously that's where England's misfiring engine room is at least spluttering along not too badly, in that middle order rather than that top to middle order. But yeah, I mean, you can take your pick on either of them, really.
Yeah. There was, Phil, your moment of the week is from the Surrey-Somerset game.
Yeah, just going back to good quicks taking good wickets. Well, Jamie Overton, who I mentioned actually last week, I think briefly, slightly remodeled run-up in particular, looks like a transformed bowler, really. He's not had a great time of it at the Oval since he moved.
As a Mahmood.
Yeah, well, he's
done a lot of work with him.
Yeah, this is what I gather, yeah. And it's really paying off. Now, I was here on the Saturday, which was day 3, and he bowled... Did you see any of it, Mark? He bowled a seriously fast, test match fast spell, and he was bowling it from the pavilion end, and folks were standing a good pitch and a bit back, and he was taking it, as I said earlier, in front of his face. Anyway, he worked out Matt Renshaw. He's a very fine player, the left-handed Aussie. He's made good runs in county cricket, made test hundreds, and he worked him out in a stunning little mini passage, generally just moving away from the left-hander, across him, a couple of short ones, and then he got this stunning banana ball to come back, just bowling right arm over, but coming back on the angle, against the natural angle, swinging late into his off stump, and he'd left it like any self-respecting lefty would, and it's arced back, taking his off stump out the ground, and it precipitated Surrey taking... Reece Topley came on, took 3 wickets in 7 deliveries, I think, changed the direction of that game. It was a big game at the top and the bottom of the table, and Somerset are now really languishing their bottom, comfortably bottom, and Surrey are now top. So again, county cricket, it has its good days, it has its less good days. That was a good day. There was quality from start to finish. Tom Abel made 150 not out, and then was cruising with 50 on the second innings until he nibbled at one outside off stump. But again, it was a very watchable game of cricket, and I saw a lot of it. There was 3,000 or 4,000 here playing on the outfield at lunchtime as well. It was just good. It was good stuff. And in Jamie Overton, look, I'm not saying he plays for England this year at all, but if that is a county bowler, then turn up and watch it. Reece Topley at the other end, 6'5", bowling 83, 84 probably, swinging it late with a ball 40 overs old and changing the direction of the game. There was a lot of good cricket on display in that game, and Surrey got home the day after by 3 wickets.
Ramattel 100 as well. He's looking good.
Very, very fine player. Yeah, good cricket.
Hampshire thumped Kent at Canterbury. There were hundreds for James Vince, Liam Dawson, and Ben Brown there. I was there for day 3. And there's quite an interesting comment from Kent's bowling coach, Simon Cook, at the end of play. Obviously loads of runs at the start of the season. And he said that part of it is because pitches have gone from not necessarily one extreme to another, but they've gone from one extreme to how pitches probably should be. So you've got a lot of young bowlers who don't actually have that much experience bowling on flat wickets. So they haven't got experience of needing to bowl dry, because in the recent past they've just had to, bowl full stump,
get it somewhere close,
and the ball will do a lot. And he was saying that this is part of the learning curve for a lot of young bowlers at the moment. So that's quite interesting. I thought Ben Brown looked very good. He's had a very good start to the season since he joined from Sussex.
Just a word on that Vince innings. 100 not out from 100 balls with 18 fours. I was watching it on a little bit on my laptop, but watching the main game here at the Oval, I mean, that's just a dream, isn't it? It's not from 92 balls or 108 balls. It's from 100 balls, 18 fours.
So is he playing the first test as well?
2.5, 3 hours. He's playing every game from here to the end of time, as well,
Getting quite a packed top 6 at this rate.
Play them all.
I enjoyed watching. We'll play an interview with Ben Compton slightly later in the show, but I enjoyed watching Ben Compton. He's obviously got loads of runs at the start of the season. But when you see someone on the scorecard score quite slowly, you kind of paint a picture of them in your head.
Also, his own quotes. He said, "I'm doing my job. I'm boring people to tears."
Exactly. But he looks good. He's like a very.
You don't want to advertise that. You get dropped for doing that in the England team.
He just looked very comfortable against Abbas and Abbott when they were bowling well and taking wickets the other end. He looked very, very confident. So yeah, he got runs again, but in defeat. Warwickshire beat Essex by 10 wickets. Michael Burgess, who we've not talked about on the show for a while, but perhaps ever, scored his second 170 of the summer. Oliver Hannon-Dorby hit, I think, one of the great noughts. Arguably the best ever. He was carded to bat in at number 11, and he came in when Liam Norwell was hit on the head and had to retire hurt. He batted for an hour to accompany Burgess, but more crucially, for long enough for Craig Miles, Norwell's concussion sub, to drive to the ground, get changed, pad up and come in after him.
You've got to love Kelly.
That in the end was worth 95 runs.
Well, that's
got to be your moment.
That's now my moment of the week.
That's brilliant. Just in brackets, my weekly, Dan Lawrence, he's torn a hamstring, Lawrence. Won't be playing this week. May not be playing for a while. I don't know the ins and outs of it. But again, going back to that England top six, he's slow start for him as well. You know, he's up against it if he's going to try and make that first test squad. So
we had a question from one listener, Pete. He asked, should England be looking to call up Vince and or Duckett, who've both started the season well? And I guess it's interesting that the start of this summer is very different to the last few county seasons where there aren't that many batters who are scoring that many runs. Whereas now you have loads of batsmen scoring runs. So you then wonder what happens to the incumbents who are just doing okay. So Lawrence hasn't had a bad start to the season, but he's not got a standout
also
score.
Incumbent in the current climate means nothing.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't think that word means what you think it means.
Yeah.
No, indeed.
And also with like Zach Crawley, he's not done badly, he's just done fine. Will that be enough when there are 15 guys averaging 60? I don't know. I think that'd be quite interesting. I guess it's just quite hard to say.
But I mean, that's great though. I mean, that's where sort of the Aussie sort of battalions of batters in the past, because they knew that if you missed out, if you didn't make the most of your opportunities in the Test team, there were 7, 8, 9, 10 blokes averaging 60 waiting to take your place, and that's a really good place to be in. One of the issues perhaps with the England team, and this doesn't come into play when you're out there batting for sure, but you kind of think to yourself, well, I've been picked and I've done okay and I'm doing all right. You know, I'm making my 40s and I've made the odd contribution here and there, and you're not really under any pressure from below, and it kind of, there isn't that same sort of laser-eyed focus that there needs to be. That this is really important that you make every time you go out there count.
Can any of you remember examples of players who have lost their place for England based on their county championship form? So Hamid in 2017. So players who haven't necessarily done badly for England, but what made them lose their spot on the side was their county form. Hamid is the most obvious example in 2017. I can't think of anyone else. But I think that there's a reasonable chance of that happening at the start of this summer.
I mean, the thing is though that you could turn around and say it's been that county form, or you could say it's the way that the West Indies trip worked out. There's not a great deal of difference there. Nobody, like I said, nobody really made an unimpeachable case for themselves in the West Indies, barring the people who would probably play anyway. Stokes, Bairstow, Root,
and that's it.
That's it.
Joe, what's your moment of the week?
Mine is the Mickey Arthur revolution at Derbyshire, which is gathering pace.
We're all talking about, Joe.
They have only... Well, we don't talk about Derbyshire enough, Phil. So we're going to this week. They have only won one match, but that is as many as they won in the whole of last year. They've also got a couple of creditable draws. There were loads of interesting personnel signings over the winter, but I thought Mickey Arthur going to Derbyshire was right up there with any of the players, because to see this kind of coach of real international pedigree take over Derbyshire right at the bottom of Division 2, just to see how it goes, how much impact can a high-quality coach have? And there was a really interesting interview that Nick Campion did in the latest Wisden Cricket Monthly, where Mickey Arthur talks about his kind of first impressions of Derbyshire. He talks about working relentlessly on fitness, and said when it comes to August and the rest of the counties are flagging, we're going to be hitting our peaks. Well, it'll be interesting to see if that can happen, whether that's even possible in county cricket. He also talks about the kind of dressing room environment. There's a nice quote where he said, "I'm throwing a little hand grenade that maybe we have to create a little bit of angst because high performance environments thrive on everybody putting enough pressure on each other to do their jobs." That sentence isn't something you'd usually associate with Derbyshire, probably. And, in some ways that's to their credit. It's a nice, well-run club, but hasn't had perhaps an edge. And it seems like maybe that's starting to pay off already. They beat Leicestershire by an innings very comprehensively. A maiden first-class 100 for Matty McKiernan. But the big story, obviously, is Shan Masood, their Pakistan overseas player, and all the things that Arthur is bringing. One is a seriously useful contacts book. So he's got Lakmal in for 2 years, and he's got Masood in for the whole of the season across all formats. And he is going like an absolute train. So he became the first Derbyshire player to score back-to-back double tons. No Derby player in history has made as many runs in their first 4 knocks, which have included 2 double centuries and 2 50s.
Do you know what he's on specifically?
So he's on 611, averaging 153. Strike rate of 74 as well, which is not what you associate with Masood. Actually, during the Middlesex game, journalist Adam Collins texted me and said, Masood's going to score 2,000 runs this season. And Colo has he has quite a lot of big claims.
We'll do it today.
Yeah, but he might be onto something here. And obviously, we have to come to the 1,000 runs before the end of May, which is about this time of year. I think we touted a couple of people last year who fell away quite dramatically. But he has got 3 matches, so potentially 6 knocks to score, 389 runs. So it is...
How many knocks, sorry? How many knocks?
Well, 3 games, so potentially 6 knocks. So it's very...
well on, isn't it?
It's very much on. They play Glamorgan this week, then Worcester, then Notts to finish off the month. So definitely worth following that one. He's an interesting character, Masood. There's a really good interview that Taha did with him on Wisden.com that's worth checking out, talking about Mickey Arthur as this kind of parent figure. I mean, he messaged him straight away and said, "I want you to come play for Derbyshire." And he's just like, absolutely, sure. And there will be other players around the world who have that relationship with Arthur who suddenly see Derbyshire as quite an appealing place to go, which, to be honest, wouldn't have been the place before his arrival. So look, they've got a very thin squad, and you look down that 11, and it should not really be competing for a promotion this year. But you never know. That's a funny division. We've already seen what Glamorgan beat Notts, and then get thrashed. So the results are weird. So if you can get half a dozen wins, then you'll be right in the mix. So definitely worth following that story, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. No one's got to 1,000 before the end of May since Graham Hick in 1988. Yeah.
Only 8 players done it before. Bradman twice, obviously.
The schedule helps more than it used to, I think.
Yep.
Oh, good. Yeah.
Blimey, you wouldn't have played. What are we getting in before the end of May?
7 possibly?
7th round, so most teams playing 6.
Yeah.
Did you ever get close, Butch?
No. No.
The last person to get close
Play a
was...
shot till mid-May.
I my last, maybe the last summer that I... Sort of 2008 before my 2008 before my knee went, I had quite a good start. I got a double here and 150 or whatever, but I don't think I was anywhere near Ramps. I thought Ramps might have done it actually. It felt like he made. He just.
What do you
He
make?
every time he batted. Over 100 twice in the whole season.
Yeah.
Nick Compton came very, very close about 10 years ago.
Rain stuffed him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think he got there on June
he got
the
there
1st.
the next day. Yeah.
Ouch.
Well, yeah, as Joe mentions, there were innings wins also for Notts, Worcester and Middlesex. In the Middlesex Glamorgan game, Shaheen and Labuschagne got each other out in all 3 innings, which is quite fun.
Was Labuschagne bowling seam?
I think he was bowling leg spin in this game.
He has been bowling a bit of seam, though, right?
He got 2 wickets the week before bowling seam. But yeah, good win for Middlesex there. Got a few questions on the county championship. Joel asks, for all its flaws, do we undersell the county championship? I can't think of any other major sporting league in this country which has 0 presence on TV, either live or through highlights. Who wants to take that one?
Well, I think there was a few points that's made on Twitter. And hello, Joel did work experience with us a while ago.
Oh.
So hi, Joel. But there was a Cricket Australia piece promoting Afridi versus Labuschagne and what like kind of a showdown that was in county cricket. And the point was made that the ECB aren't really doing that. And I think that is absolutely valid. Now, I think the ECB, county cricket is a hard thing to promote. 4-day county cricket is a hard thing to promote. So I think there are some unrealistic expectations out there, but I do agree that much more could be done picking out these battles. There are some seriously good players playing at the moment.
I think the clubs themselves, though, have kind of got a duty. I know that the with the streaming and everything, you know, the way that the clubs sort of are getting into promoting themselves a little bit better on things like social media. But I think really the clubs have the responsibility to do that themselves.
I think that's true. I think some are better than others. Middlesex are having a press conference today presenting
but what they
Hans
can't,
Commander Freedy. But
what they can't do is have what they don't have the power to do is an overriding, an overriding promotion of the game as a whole, and that does land in the ECB's lap. And and people have rightly sort of tagged in Sky Cricket. You know, why haven't you put together like a weekly roundup or whatever after
Match
the rounds?
of the day style.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
and you kind of I'm sort of thinking about the logistics of that. I mean, you've got hundreds of hours of those live streams, all of which would need to be packaged and put together, and it's very, very labour intensive.
and some of the footage is not great. Some's good.
Very,
some's not,
very labour intensive. I mean, the show, you could, I suppose, you have talking heads around a desk or whatever, and you can run in the odd clip of wickets or whatever, or pick out a bowler or two. I know that the resources are stretched in the cricket department as never before, perhaps at Sky. So it might, it could be done. It could be done. I think, again, the sort of the idea that suddenly the first class cricket, wherever it might be played in the world, I think it's here in England, it's always been better supported than pretty much anywhere else. Regardless of what people say. Nobody watches it in Australia. Nobody watches it in South Africa. It's kind of, we have our own thing going here with county cricket, and always have done. And perhaps more could be done. It's tricky though, because it's labour intensive and it's costly.
I think part of the frustration is that people appreciate that the ECB have a dedicated county championship social handle across all the social media platforms, not TikTok, interestingly, which is where all the kids are on. But they don't do anything on the official England channels that have millions and millions of followers. So you've got Harris Ralph charging into bowl for Yorkshire. They're not shouting about that on the channels that are going to be followed by more people basically.
Because it's very polarised, isn't it? You'll have your Yorkshire fans or your Surrey fans or whatever it might be, but that's only going to reach a small percentage of the cricket
and also
public.
On your point about resources, I mean these counties don't have a huge amount of resource. They probably have one person in their media department who's doing all the clipping up of the action, and the ECB, as we talked about earlier, probably do have those resources to employ a couple more people whose job it would be to promote that. I think it also kind of promotes itself, right? Like when Shaheen's bowling to Marnus Labuschagne, that creates a buzz that happens anyway on social media. It's not as if no one's talking about that. And I guess what's quite difficult with county cricket is that it's just hard to follow when you have 8 games going on at the same time.
Just going back to what Butch said, it relates to a question actually that someone sent in maybe this morning. Should we consider the county championship to be a more high profile, a more kind of pedigree tournament compared to others? Well, it is. It's the only one that you see a top end Australian come and play in. You never see an Australian play in the Ranji Trophy. You never see an Indian play in the Sheffield Shield. You never see an Englishman play in either of those two tournaments either. But you do still get Shaheen against Labuschagne. Now that might be
in Div 2.
In Div 2, that might be an extreme example, sure. But you do still get these appointment to view matchups. You do still get quality, not across the board, famously not across the board, but in large pockets. And it has its own identity in a way that arguably the others around the world don't. The others are more sort of functional to serve the purposes of the national side, whereas the county championship here at least has its own distinct identity and stands, albeit shakily, on its own 2 feet. Just a word on Lancashire's stream, by the way. So they've taken it all to the next level. Somerset and Middlesex were taking it to their own level last year. Well, now Lancs, they've got Paul Allott in the studio at Old Trafford. They've got Bumble doing pitch reports. And James Price, their comms fella, said that they had over 3 million views on the clips that they put out themselves as a club, and over 300,000 views on the stream over the 4 days of their game just gone. So that is the model. Now, as you say, Lancashire have more money than lots of other counties that are non-Test match counties, for sure. So there needs to be a degree of central funding if we want the overall product to be amplified. That's a big issue for sure. But they are showing the way, and I would like to think that in 4 or 5 years' time, that will be the accepted model, and that all counties will have a version of that.
Yeah, I think the basic answer to the question is yes. More could be made of it for sure. Absolutely. And
if there's a massive sponsor out there that fancies getting involved with Wisden, then we'll put one together.
Yeah, absolutely.
No bother.
I mean, but that's the thing. There's no, there is absolutely no harm in amplifying it. Finding a way to do that is cost effective, because that's what it comes down to in every way possible. I suppose is the big hurdle.
We had another question in the championship from Andrew. He says, I've been seeing a lot of heated debate with regards to the county championship on Twitter, and diehards refusing to give any inch, claiming that by virtue of purely having good contests, it doesn't need to change, or that the season and number of games shouldn't be reduced. My question is, surely the county championship cannot remain static forever. If you never change and you get lost, ask Man United or Arsenal. Surely every county championship player at age 18 dreams of playing for England, so why don't counties try and facilitate this and nurture this? I know it's easier for certain counties with money, but I just think that there needs to be more synergy between international and domestic setup, and I don't get people who either want to scrap the championship completely or leave it alone as sacred. That's quite interesting in the context of this week, where a number of players through the PCA have said they want fewer county championship games. I think Sam Cook said that it's just too hard for players and ground staff to put on good cricket with the current volume of cricket that's being played.
I think that's always been the case. I think the players have always felt that in order to give the best of themselves, it's a few years since it's been 16 county games this season, but when I started it was 17. In fact, when I started it was 23. They were mixture of 3-day matches and 4-day matches. It was crazy. So I think it's always been the case that the players have recognised that in order to give the best of themselves and to make the games really mean something every time they go out there and play, that playing as many as we do is not viable. The thing that's changed and perhaps really brought that into focus is now the fact that you've got a fourth competition in, and that nothing is given really. There's been nothing taken away. You just keep adding things without taking anything away. The members, I think it's up to 16,000 members here at the Oval now. There's over 10, 11, 12,000 at Lancs. The memberships are going up around the country. Members are going to be very upset about the idea that they're not going to have as many days county cricket to dip in and out of over the course of the summer. But one thing I would say was I bumped into a couple of the Surrey committee members during the course of this week. I said, what are the members paying nowadays? What's it cost to be a member of Surrey County Cricket Club? And he went, I said, well, come on, how much? 220 quid, he said. I was like, 220 quid? Well, I mean, what value is that? It's extraordinary. So, which is not to, it's not. I'm not decrying the members and the membership and what they bring. But all I'm saying is the value that you get for a very, very small outlay really is extraordinary. If the players are saying, always be slightly wary of employees wanting to do less work. I admit that. But if the players kind of all agree that it wouldn't be terrible in order to come down to 10 matches, I would say 12 because of the weather and various other things, but 10, however you want to work it out. I don't think it would be the end of the world. I really don't. And it would make it, funnily enough, it would make doing things like the streaming and really sort of advertising the matchups and all these kinds a damn sight easier, and make the whole, eventually, once people got over the shock and the horror of it all, would actually make bringing the sort of the championship into national consciousness. Indeed. Much easier.
The product becomes more tantalising, more persuasive, more interesting, and touch on pitches without wanting to go down that rabbit hole again. But undoubtedly, the longer run that you have as a groundsman to produce a good track, the better chance you're going to have at doing it.
And in terms of those members that you mentioned, Butch, as well, they might have fewer games to watch, but if those games are more in the heart of the summer, then that's a payoff that I think a lot of members would be very happy to.
And you get that situation, don't you, whereby if there are so many days, you can kind of go, well, I'm not going to bother going that day. But it becomes an appointment then, doesn't it? You kind of like, well, I'm not going to miss that. I have to be there for this one. With all kinds of change, there's going to be there's pain that comes along with it, and there are things that people don't want to disappear. However, I just think that it's going to go that way, and there isn't a great deal that can be done about it. If you don't somehow try to make the whole thing more attractive in every way possible, i.e. in terms of producing better players, in terms of making the product more watchable, more easier to follow, then it will get run over by other things that are more interesting and more easy to follow and more high profile and more glamorous, if you like.
Where do you start on that?
Last week I spoke to Ben Compton, who's a leading run scorer in Division 1 at the moment. He's had an amazing start to the season. He's kind of come from nowhere. He only played a handful of county championship matches before the start of the season, and now he's already got 5 first-class hundreds in 2022. Here's that chat with Ben. If you look at the number of runs you scored, you were the second leading run scorer in the second 11 championship in 2019. You're the leading run scorer in 2021. Has it just been quite frustrating that it's taken you 3 years, I guess, to get a proper first team?
Well, that's the challenging thing, you know. I think just the foundations and the building blocks weren't quite stacking up right for me. I think, you know, whether it be in terms of opportunities, obviously, perhaps unluckily, on a very personal perspective, you know, not signed Hassameed in the back end of 2019, and I think that was always going to be tricky for me to break in and get that run of games, you know, which I think most players will tell you is an important part of trying to get the best out of someone. So, you know, the opportunities I did get, I was sort of to my own detriment. It's my own fault, I guess, but I was very, very focused on trying to make an impact in one game, you know, and you can get a bit too wound up or whatever, you know, and I think what's worked is just for the best thing to get the best out of someone is, you know, just to relax and try and treat it as another game of cricket, you know. I found opportunities hard to come by, but as you say, I did well in second 11 cricket, so I did feel like I was playing well and trying to get better all the time.
Looking back before 2019, you're obviously 28 now. You were still 25 in 2019. So what's your story leading up to that? Because that is still a relatively late entry into county cricket.
You just cut out there for a second, but I think if you're alluding to my late entry, yeah, it was very tough. One of the major challenges for me is obviously I grew up in South Africa and wanted to come over to England and to try and follow in, I guess, my cousin's footsteps. And then, you know, obviously Dennis had his own thing going on, but I wanted to try and forge a career for myself over here. And it was tough going. I sort of found myself on the outside of the system. You know, I came over and wanted to try and impress by scoring a lot of runs in club cricket and hoping to progress through that manner, but it didn't really happen. It was slow going. I don't think my experience was that club cricket wasn't necessarily a feeder for county cricket anymore. So I found it difficult to really earn an opportunity to play, and you know, that's why there was a game there, a game here, not necessarily doing badly either. In the games I played, I think I got 100 in one of them, but just through the nature of things, there wasn't any future or progression from there. So it would have been back end of 2018 and 2019 where I trialled with Kent. I actually joined their bowlers on a pre-season tour to Stellenbosch. So I would bat against their bowlers, and through that I kind of found a way of getting a chance to play in their second team in the early part of 2019, and through that I played and did well, and then joined. I think the way Kent was their lineup at the moment, they had quite a few batters. I think Heine Kuhn was still here, a couple of other cricketers. So the opportunity actually came from Nottingham in the back end of 2019. So yeah, it was a late entry. I did study in between that period. Thankfully, I got a degree in politics. So I made try to, have that backup, have that balance to my life. Obviously trying to pursue a career in cricket, but obviously having that balance on the side of getting a degree.
Were there points up until then where you thought that professional cricket might not happen?
Absolutely, yeah. Definitely. There's definitely a lot of sleepless nights, and mainly through frustration, through lack of opportunity to play. I guess I was really driven and really hungry, and I am really driven and really hungry to try and play. And I would find that probably one of the more frustrating things. If that classic question, if you had your time again, what would you do differently? I'd probably like to have finished school here, because then I'd like to think I would have maybe got into a under 17 Middlesex, whatever, and then progress, or again under 15s, under 17s, 19s, etc., and try and come through that way. But that would probably, who knows? That period of life I might have learned different things and resilience and something along those lines.
Yeah. Well, if cricket never happened, what do you think you'd have ended up doing in your late 20s?
Got a few ideas. Wouldn't say I'm nailed on one of them. I like the idea of psychology, something along those lines. I like the idea of helping people. I like the idea of interacting with people. And dealing with people. I wouldn't say one-on-one would be something I quite enjoy.
Your cousin's Nick Compton, is that he tweeted something when you got 100 the other day? Have you spoken to him quite a lot over the last 2-3 years?
Yeah, Nick and I are quite close. He's been extremely helpful for me for a number of years now, just quietly and trying to learn from him. I think at the peak of his powers, he was a very, very good player, and he obviously had a very successful county career. And just really knows batting, the intricacies of batting. And I've tried to take certain things from that to try and learn, and still, only getting started really, but still trying to learn. But yeah, he's been very helpful and supportive. So that's been nice to have him in my corner.
In the recent Wisden Readers survey, you told us that signed memorabilia was the top priority addition for the Wisden shop. We listened and have since sourced an extremely rare range of pieces featuring signatures from the likes of Sachin Tendulkar, Virat Kohli, MS Dhoni, Ben Stokes, Josh Buttler, Shane Warne and Brian Lara. Each piece comes with a hologram certificate of authenticity and is exclusive to the Wisden shop with global shipping available. Whether you're looking for a unique collector's item or the ultimate gift, this is a rare opportunity to own something truly special. The IPL, Josh Buttler has continued his freakish run of form. He's the top scorer in the competition by miles, having scored his third 100 in this year's tournament. 4 of the last 7 IPL tons have been hit by Buttler. His Rajasthan Royals team are top of the league at the time of recording. They've got a very well-rounded attack. They've got Bolt and Krishna with a new ball, Chahal and Ashwin in the middle overs. What's struck me in the last week, watching quite a few of the games, is how many relatively unknown bowlers there are who bowl 85 miles per hour. Obviously, Umran Malik has come from nowhere. He's taken up the headlines. But yesterday was a guy, Kuldeep Sen, who's playing one of his first IPL games. He was bowling almost 90 miles per hour at times and really hurrying very good players. I wanted to talk very briefly about Kohli. He scored 2 golden ducks in a row this week before scoring a torturous 10-ball 9 where he could have been out at least 4 times in those 10 balls. And I know we've talked a lot about Kohli and his lack of hundreds recently, but there have been times where he's not got the big scores but has looked quite good. Now he is looking really bad in a way that I didn't think was possible. But how does that happen to a player so good?
I think he needs it. I think he could do with a couple of months off.
That's what Ravi Shastri said, wasn't it, last week?
Pretty much it.
He said if there's ever a player out there that needs a breather, unless they're going to be fried in the brain, he's got 6 or 7 years left at the top potentially, but can't lose him now.
I think that's it. Really, I mean, you think back to taking over the Test match captaincy, leading them to the top of the world, being captain of RCB, some of those incredible seasons that he had, sort of, dragging that, him and AB de Villiers dragging that sort of team through to finals in IPLs. As much as we talk about schedules for England players, for India, it's utterly brutal.
It never stops.
Never stops, and the pressure there is tenfold to what anything that any England player will ever experience. And so he could do his 6 months calling his jets, really.
If he takes that long a break, would he not be slightly concerned that he wouldn't get back in the side? Now, I know that sounds ridiculous based on his record, but it does feel like we're getting to that point with the number of young batters they've got coming through. I don't know if he is even allowed to set out an IPL. That feels like it would be a sort of earth-shattering moment in Indian cricket.
Well, no, I don't. I think that's the sort of challenge that a great player like him would relish. If you want to light the fire back up underneath somebody, tell him he's not good enough to get back in the side again.
But again,
and then watch how many runs he makes. Yeah, but I think he's done. He's absolutely done and needs to walk away for a little while.
Yeah, and undoubtedly, that's the logical call. But try and, sit in our armchairs and be sort of COD psychologists for a minute and imagine what it's like to be the greatest player in the world, the biggest icon in the world, in the cricketing world, and not being able to score a run. And then people start talking about you to large audiences saying, well, he's got to walk away or he's fried. If you are that bloke, and I'm sitting very comfortably in my armchair here, but if you are that bloke, wouldn't you kind of think, well, sod you, right? I'm going to go out tomorrow and prove to you that what you're talking about is ill-informed nonsense, and I am still the greatest. Is it not that kind of tunnel vision that gets somebody to that position in the first place, and to redirect that kind of laser focus that's been so marked in his career up to now, to redirect that? That's one hell of a challenge, isn't it, psychologically?
But I don't think, I think there are precedents there in Indian cricket with somebody like Sachin. And now Sachin Tendulkar never played as much cricket or as much non-stop cricket as Virat Kohli has done. Never. India went long periods of time where they didn't play any test matches or whatever it might have been. Yeah, they played hundreds of 50-over games and all the rest of it. But it just isn't the same. So I think at some point, somebody, either himself or somebody very close to him, just say, look, it's not going to do you any harm whatsoever just to put the whole thing down for a couple of months. And come back with, he's lost the captaincy recently. He's become a father again. All of these things kind of add up in terms of mental.
And we can see all of that from a distance. But if you just take, I don't know, like a Ronaldo type case, if Ronaldo's having a stinker for a month and he can't hit a barn door, who goes to Ronaldo and taps him on the shoulder and says, you know what, just take a few weeks off? If you are Ronaldo, you're going to go, excuse me.
Sorry, Scott
I'm playing tomorrow morning, and if I'm not, then, you're out the job, let alone me.
There's also, and Kohli, he might not be captain anymore, but there's no way he's going to miss the test here this summer, which will crown his achievement in a way. I mean,
when he's just in the ranks, it's crazy.
It's going to be a really odd match overall. That with so much has changed, and it's meant to be part of the same series. It's going to be a very odd thing to promote. But he will be here this summer. Whether he should be or not, whether it be better for him to take a break is a moot point. But there's no way he's not going to be here this summer, injury permitting.
I guess it's just quite strange for a sports person to go that long in their career without having a significant slump. Like, you hear it a lot with really good county players who come through. They've dominated age group cricket. They get in at 18 and then really struggle. They have a couple of years where they work things out and then come back in and everything's fine.
Part of the fun of English cricket.
With Kohli, it's just like, I know he had a difficult series in England in 2014, but really, aside from that,
he was meant to be the one who was unbreakable. And his story has shown that no one is unbreakable in cricket. There's just too much. His story shows that
cricket destroys everybody.
My moment of the week, by the way, is this belter of an interview by Ali Martin, The Guardian, with Ravi Shastri. There are just so many great lines with quite a few swears, so if that's not your thing, avert your ears. This was him on getting the India coaching job for the first time. I had no warning. I was commentating the Oval during India's 2014 tour of England and came off air to find 6 or 7 missed calls. 7 bloody calls? What's happening here? The BCCI just said, we want you to take over starting tomorrow at any cost.
at any cost.
I told them I'd have to speak to my family and commercial partners, but they just said they would sort all of that. And like that, I was straight in from the commentary box. You'll see that when I joined the setup during the ODIs, I was still in jeans and loafers. If you go on Getty and search Ravi Shastri 2014, this is true. He is in India training kit up top, but wearing jeans and loafers below the waist.
Diamond, isn't he?
On getting the coaching job without having done much of it before. And I didn't have any coaching badges either. Level 1, level 2, fuck that. In a country like India, there's always jealousy or a gang of people willing you to fail. On winning in Australia, it was about attitude, especially when playing the Aussies. And I told the boys, if one single fuck you comes your way, give them 3 back. 2 in our language, 1 in theirs. Just absolutely astonishing.
I mean, Ali stitched it together very nicely, but I was sort of jealous reading it because it's one of those interviews you're like, oh, that's just so good. Basically, just run the quotes. You don't need to add anything to it. He's said it all. It's, yeah. One of a kind, and buried in there, he's going to be commentating on the 100 this summer.
Really? Fantastic!
Yeah, so that should be fun. He is one of a kind.
What's he like? You must have worked
fabulous. With him. He is absolutely fabulous. I think that first time I sort of spent any time, he was a teammate of my old man's at Glamorgan back in the day, so I kind of known him and of him forever. But I remember working with him on The Verdict with Charles and Bob. I think it might have been that 2014 series. It was just some of the best sort of 45 minutes of my television career. It was just hilarious sitting there watching him and Bob go at it. And then you kind of like throw in a little bomb and he comes up flying at you and the voice is booming and everything. He's absolutely brilliant. I'd made one tremendous mistake actually. Working on one of the IPLs that I did. I can't remember if it was the first. It was probably the first one. It would have been the first one because I wouldn't have done it again. And we kind of, Ravi would come over in between doing his stuff for the BCCI for the World Feed and whatever. He'd come over to the little camera point, me and Ben Wilkins, sweating our nudges off down on the side of the boundary, and come over and give us 5 minutes back to the studio. And I think I might have stood there. I saw him coming over out of the corner of my eye, and as he got into earshot, which has to be damn close because it was bloody loud, I did a Ravi impersonation. And, welcome to you back in the studio like this, and he just stared at me and gave me didn't say a damn thing, and I was kind of like, okay, thanks, Rav, see you soon. Don't take the Mickey out of the great man, that is for sure.
Was that on air?
That was on air, yeah.
I wonder if a clip of that still exists.
Surprised he's still got a career in that, to be honest.
I know. I don't know what I was doing, but it was all good. It was all good.
That is a challenge for our listeners to find that clip for our next week's show. Some other news this week. Kieran Pollard has announced his retirement from international cricket at the age of 34 after 224 games across formats for the West Indies. Joe, you spoke to him not that long ago, and he sounded like he was doing it slightly longer.
Yeah, that was in the lead up to the T20 World Cup, and he was seemingly relishing that role and enjoying putting his stamp on West Indies cricket. I don't think the captaincy was anything he'd particularly courted. Not dissimilar to the kind of Ben Stokes scenario, just got it by kind of sheer strength of personality, I think, and the fact that everyone else had done it. But yeah, it seemed like he was in it for long haul. The T20 World Cup obviously did not go well at all for West Indies. They were really kind of very disappointing. But they did have that kind of stirring win against England recently, and he's 34? Not hugely shocked that he wants to leave the international game around this point, but I'd have thought he'd have stuck around for the T20 World Cup later this year. So I haven't heard any suggestions that there's politics involved, which often is the case in West Indies cricket. Seems like he maybe just had enough and wants to stick with the kind of T20 league circuit. But it's a shame for the World Cup. He's faded a little bit from the force he was 2 or 3 years ago, but he's still one hell of a player and a big loss to a big tournament.
Yeah,
he's struggling at the moment. I mean, everyone is playing for Mumbai. 0 from 8, I think it is. Played 8, lost 8.
Yeah.
And I saw him sort of struggle to get nowhere near the line, really. I think it was 19 from 20 balls in a run chase against Gujarat the other day. And he sort of encapsulated how forlorn that whole franchise looks. Now, I know that they've taken a bit of a punt on Jofra, who's obviously not available for this tournament. So maybe this is they're future-proofing rather than focusing on this one, if you like. But still pretty painful to watch, right? And a lot of pedigree players, great players, are stinking the place out really at the minute. and Pollard is one of them. And when it doesn't work for you, and he has that way about him, block 6, block 6. But that when you're not landing those sixes, then it can look awkward to say the least. And it just seemed like that was just summing up how much they are struggling at the moment. They are currently on course to break all records for the wrong reasons for this year.
On Pollard, I wonder that West Indies side in the T20 World Cup last year was really old, and they did well against against England early this year with a very different side. So I guess the challenge as captain is very different. It almost feels like a fresh start, and maybe he just didn't really want to continue.
Well, he was very much a father figure in that not literally, but obviously clearly. But not
keep that in.
What are you talking about? but the likes of Rodman Powell and Odin Smith, etc. You kind of look at those guys and think, well, does Kieran Pollard's presence particularly in the batting lineup, does he kind of get in the way of that type of striking power which they have right the way down the list? Even Akil Hussain, the left arm spinner, can bang them. So maybe he just looks at it and thought, what, I'm creaking here, and the West Indies have got some youngsters who perhaps can take care of themselves better now than they might have done 6 months ago, and it's time for me to stand aside and let them get on with it.
There's a great moment in that series when after one of the West Indies wins, you asked him a question in the post-match press conference. He starts singing at you.
Yes, yeah, you'll find that one easier than the Ravi Shastri one.
Some news from South Africa this week. Graham Smith, the former CSA Director of Cricket, has been cleared of racism charges in an independent arbitration process following a report, the Social Justice and Nation Building report. They initially made tentative findings that Smith had engaged in prejudicial behaviour on 3 counts. It was found that there was no evidence that Smith had engaged in racial discrimination. Finally, we have a question from Cricket Nosh, who asks, which cricket ground in the world has the best food?
It's a Twitter account dedicated to
Cricket Nosh. So I think they're looking for a definitive answer
Super.
here. But as a player, was it just Lord?
Edgbaston's good.
Yeah.
Lord, well, Edgbaston wasn't that good.
He's now
back in the day. No, it probably
a
might
hack,
be
it's
now.
great.
But
He's
back in the day.
unbelievable.
So, Lord, the standard is set by Lord. Adelaide Oval was always very good. It had this incredible chicken with some kind of dip that was absolutely magnificent. You get sushi there and everything as well.
In the sort of marquee tent.
Yeah,
outside,
it always stood out there. Anywhere else? The Oval was always pretty good during county games and stuff like that.
The Oval gives you a full English just to get you ready
in
for
the
your
morning.
lunch. Yeah,
in the morning.
So you got the full works ready from.
You barely make it through a day though. You need a nap in the first session.
Yeah, but you don't have to. You're just watching cricket. It's easy. Yeah, and then you just write some nonsense at the end of it. It's dead easy.
But Lords is obvious, but Adelaide Oval, I'd have a special mention.
That was going to be one of my two are both overseas. Adelaide Oval, the spread they put on. I remember a lunch. I think it was on day one, and it was oysters and white wine. And just this amazing seafood and stuff.
Wine at lunch?
Yeah, and because I think it was the host was a wine company, one of the local vineyards, and you're just
Jeff
like
Merrill or someone.
Yeah, I don't think many people made it back for the first ball of the second session, and the other one was India, and I think it was Chennai. Indian food's just the best for me anyway. But the spreads you get at Indian match, because it's not just your dish, it's 15 different dishes, and this one was spectacular. But I remember Derek Pringle was suffering quite badly with food poisoning.
Gone down in legend, that one.
And was kind of almost in tears that he couldn't enjoy the spread that was laid out in front of him because he was still suffering from the previous day.
I'm not telling tales out of school here. I did an India tour 2012. Pring was on it. Great geezer, great bloke. He was on it for the Telegraph. Didn't see him for the whole game. Mumbai. It wasn't for lack of trying. He just couldn't get out of his hotel room.
I think
Chelmsford, you're lucky if you get a bag of crisps. I think I can say that. I'll probably never be allowed back in there ever again. But Headingley has a poorish reputation, but I've never personally had an issue with the food up there.
Yeah.
But that doesn't go down
But
great.
what you said at the start, Edgbaston for the press is just another level.
Yeah.
Like a biryani or
You got
a
your full
roast
range,
or
don't you? Yeah.
Yeah. And
that was a very weird plate of food.
Yes,
kind of
yes.
4 completely different things.
But you're satisfied at 140. That's the most important thing.
My problem with Lords, it shows off a bit too much. You know,
So
there's vol au vents and
I don't want soup.
meringues
I don't
and
want
stuff
soup.
like that. You know, come on.
Yeah.
Still, it's just a cricket game.
I think people are probably getting really annoyed that
we could go on.
You've got journalists complaining about the food that they're getting for free whilst watching cricket for free.
This is exactly the problem with cricket.
Yeah.
A one-off.
Of all of the problems.
Yeah.
This is it.
I think we should finish there. Cheers, guys. This has been the Wisden Cricket Weekly Podcast. Thanks for listening, and we'll be back next week.